Have you ever wondered what secrets a quiet, isolated farm might be hiding? Especially one guarded by a woman who never asks for help and never lets anyone close. Most people drive past her land without looking twice, assuming it's nothing more than a forgotten piece of countryside. Just open fields, worn fences, and a farmhouse older than the town itself. But what if I told you that behind that silence, behind those shuttered windows, lives someone far more dangerous than anyone could ever imagine? Someone whose past is buried so deep that even speaking her name once sent trained soldiers into silence? If you stay with me until the end of this video, I'll reveal something about her story that most people will never believe. Something that changes the entire truth of who she is and why a ruthless gang chose the wrong farm to invade. Trust me, it's worth hearing. Tonight, our story begins with a strange kind of stillness, a silence thick enough to feel like it's watching you. Mara Caldwell had lived alone on her land for nearly a decade, and in all that time, no one had ever dared to bother her. Not because she looked intimidating. No, Mara was quiet, almost invisible, the kind of person you'd forget the moment you passed her. But her silence wasn't emptiness, it was discipline. Every step she took around her farm carried purpose. Every habit was precise. Every movement was controlled. And if anyone actually paid attention, they'd notice something unsettling about her calm, something that didn't belong on a peaceful farm. Locals whispered about her, though never loudly. Some said she was strange. Others said she was hiding from something. And a few, the ones who had driven past her property late at night, claimed they heard noises you wouldn't expect in the countryside. Short, sharp cracks in the darkness that vanished as quickly as they came. But no one ever questioned her. No one ever knocked on her door. And no one ever learned why a woman so quiet carried herself with the focus of someone who had survived things most people couldn't imagine. What no one knew, what no one could know, was that Mara Caldwell wasn't just a woman living alone. She was the last person any sane person would want to disturb because her past was built not on fear but on precision, discipline, and deadly skill. A past she had promised never to return to. A past she had buried, locked away like a weapon she hoped to never use again. But fate has a cruel habit of knocking on the very doors we hope will stay silent. And on this night, long before anyone else realized it, Mara felt something shift in the air. Something wrong, something approaching. She paused at the edge of her porch, her eyes scanning the horizon. She didn't know what was coming yet, but she could feel it. The way a storm announces itself before the clouds appear. This was the last quiet night her land would ever know. Mara lingered on her porch longer than usual, the cool night air brushing against her face as if carrying a warning only she could understand. She didn't flinch, didn't tense, didn't panic. Instead, she simply listened. The world around her was too still, no rustling animals, no distant hum of engines on the county road, not even the soft chirp of crickets that normally filled the darkness. To most people, silence was empty. But to Mara, silence was information. Silence meant something was shifting. She turned her gaze across the open field stretching out before her. The moonlight slid across the tall grass like a thin silver blade, and for a moment, everything looked normal. But Mara knew better. She had learned long ago that danger rarely announced itself with noise. Real threats approached quietly, counting on surprise. They moved with intention, they waited for the right moment, and whatever was moving toward her farm tonight moved with that same calculated patience. Inside the house, she set her coffee cup down on the wooden counter. The cup was chipped, worn and familiar, one of the last reminders of a life before solitude. But tonight, even the simple act of setting it down felt heavier. Mara's instincts weren't dramatic or exaggerated. They were precise. They had kept her alive more times than she cared to remember. And right now, they were telling her that she was no longer alone on her land. A faint vibration traveled through the floorboards, a subtle tremor, too light for most people to detect, but not for her. Vehicles, several of them moving slowly, almost crawling along the dirt road leading toward her property. She didn't rush to the window. She didn't need. Instead, she moved to the center of the room, letting her senses adjust, listening for the rhythm of engines rolling closer, stopping intermittently as if checking positions. Mara inhaled deeply, the air sliding into her lungs with the same calm she had mastered in her previous life. And that calm was exactly why this night was different. She had spent years trying to forget who she used to be, burying her skills under a simple routine of farm work and quiet days. But a lifetime of discipline doesn't just disappear. It waits, it listens, it prepares. She walked to a wooden cabinet near the back wall. To an outsider, it looked like a handmade pantry, the kind old farmers built decades ago. But Mara didn't open it for food. Her fingers pressed against a small knot in the wood, one that didn't quite match. A soft click responded. The cabinet shifted, revealing a concealed compartment behind it. Inside lay items that had not seen the light of day in years. Locked metal cases, neatly coiled gear, precision tools she hoped she'd never need again. For a long second she stared at them, not with fear, not with hesitation, but with quiet resignation. She had hoped she would never open this compartment again. She had hoped her past would stay dead. But the engines outside told her otherwise. Trouble was coming. Trouble always came for people trying to live quietly. Mara closed the compartment halfway, not taking anything out yet. She didn't need to, not until she confirmed what exactly was approaching. But preparing it, unlocking the past even slightly, was a choice. A signal. A line she could never uncross. And as the distant headlights finally glimmered against the far edge of her fields, she whispered to herself, not out of fear, but out of acceptance. So it begins. The faint glow of the headlights crept closer, stretching across the field like thin, crawling fingers searching for something to grasp. Mara did not move from her place near the unlocked cabinet. She stood as still as a carved statue, watching the shifting beams of light dance through the gaps in her curtains. Most people would have panicked at the sight of unknown vehicles approaching at this hour, but Mara had learned long ago that fear clouded judgment. And judgment was the one thing she could not afford to lose, not tonight. As the engines rumbled nearer, she recognized the sound. These weren't trucks from the nearby farms. These weren't county patrol cars. The rhythm was wrong, too aggressive, too heavy, too confident. Men who arrived with kindness did not drive like this. Men who came with requests to not slowly kill their engines one by one, as if positioning themselves in a formation. These were men who assumed the land belonged to them before they ever stepped foot on it. The low hum faded into a heavy silence once more, punctuated only by the faint ticking of cooling engines outside. Mara closed her eyes briefly and listened. She heard footsteps, more than 10. Weighted, staggered, uneven, the kind of steps taken by men who believed their strength alone was enough to intimidate. She heard laughter too, low and careless, the sound of someone who saw this land as easy prey. Her heartbeat remained steady. She finally approached the window, keeping her body positioned so her shadow wouldn't betray her. Through the sliver of space between the curtains, she saw shapes moving at the edge of her property. Figures jumped down from trucks, stretching, talking, pointing toward her home, as if they were choosing their next target. Even from a distance, Mara recognized the posture, the swagger of men who had spent a long time being feared and far too little time being challenged. The Iron Vultures. She had heard their name before. In town, people whispered it like a curse. A gang known for extortion, violence, and raids. They hunted rural properties, taking what they wanted from those who couldn't fight back. No mercy, no hesitation. But the thing that made them truly dangerous wasn't their brutality. It was their confidence, their belief that no one could stop them. Tonight, they were about to discover how wrong that belief truly was. Mara stepped away from the window and inhaled slowly. The air tasted colder, sharper, as if the world itself was holding its breath. She crossed the room with calm, deliberate steps and opened the concealed compartment fully this time. The faint metallic scent drifted out, mixing with the wood and dust of her farmhouse. Her fingers brushed over the cases inside, not out of nostalgia but out of necessity. She didn't move like someone preparing for war. She moved like someone returning to a skill she had mastered long ago. A skill she had locked away but never forgotten. Her past hadn't disappeared. It had simply been waiting. Outside, another voice shouted orders, sharper and more commanding than the rest. The kind of voice that belonged to a leader used to obedience. Mara didn't need to see him to understand who he was. The name alone carried enough cruelty to silence an entire town. She had never met him, never seen his face, but she could sense the weight of his presence through the walls. More footsteps approached the farmhouse. "This is it," she murmured, almost with a hint of sadness, as her hand closed around the handle of the first metal case. She didn't fear the men outside. She feared only what she would have to become to stop them. The men outside began spreading out, their boots crunching against the gravel as they fanned across the front of the property. Mara listened to their careless stomping, their offhand jokes, their crude confidence, as if they were entering an abandoned house rather than a fortified life built by a woman they underestimated. She closed the first metal case with a quiet click, then pulled out a narrow bundle wrapped in black canvas. The fabric felt familiar beneath her fingers, warm but still reliable, like shaking hands with an old part of herself she never thought she'd meet again. She unwrapped the bundle, revealing the long, cold structure of a precision rifle. Every component fit together with a soft mechanical certainty, like a machine remembering its purpose. She didn't rush. She didn't need to. The Iron Vultures had no idea what they were walking into, and they had no reason to suspect that every second they spent on her land was a second they were surrendering the advantage they thought they owned. It had been years, yet her hands moved with the same grace and muscle memory she once relied on in places far more dangerous than this quiet farmhouse. She didn't smile, but something in her eyes shifted, an echo of the soldier she used to be. She had buried that part of herself deep, but tonight, she felt it rising from beneath the years of soil she had piled on top of it. A sudden metal crash outside snapped through the night. Someone had kicked over a bucket near the barn. Laughter followed, rough, mocking, the sound of men who thought they were scaring someone fragile inside. They wanted her afraid. They wanted the power that came from her fear. Mara set the rifle down on the table and straightened. Her expression didn't change. Fear was not an emotion she had room for. She walked to the side door, her quiet habitual escape route, used only when she wanted to disappear into the fields unnoticed. But tonight she wasn't disappearing. She was repositioning. Before stepping out, she reached beneath the small drawer near the doorframe and pulled out a small earpiece, a relic from her old world. She didn't need communication. She needed sound clarity. With the device, she could hear footsteps through walls, breathing patterns in the dark, whispered conversations from yards away. She placed it into her ear, and instantly the world sharpened. She heard Razor Cane before she saw him. His voice carried a certain authority, raspy, confident, amused. He was giving orders with the casual tone of a man who assumed he would win before the fight had even begun. A spread out. Check the barn first. She's probably asleep. Won't know what hit her. His arrogance didn't anger Mara. It informed her. She had faced men like him before. Men who built their reputations on violence but never on discipline. Men who attacked without studying their enemy. Men who mistook silence for weakness. Mara opened the side door and slipped into the night, closing it behind her without a sound. The cool air wrapped around her as she stepped onto her land. The same land she had tended with patient hands. The same land these men believed they could claim. She paused, listening to the rhythm of footsteps mixed with Razor's commands. They were moving clumsily, confidently, unaware of their exposure. Every sound told her a story. Every voice mapped a position. Every careless laugh marked another target who believed this would be easy. She moved across the yard with practiced stealth, her boots avoiding the loose soil and dry leaves she knew by heart. She was no longer just Mara the farmer. She was the shadow she had tried to bury. The ghost from her past returning step by quiet step. And as the moonlight caught the edge of her rifle barrel, she whispered to the darkness, more a vow than a threat. "You picked the wrong farm." Mara slipped into the shadows behind her barn just as the first group of gang members approached it from the opposite side. Their flashlights cut rough shapes through the dark, jittery beams sweeping across the wooden boards like impatient hands searching for something to break. She watched them from a distance, her breathing slow and controlled, each inhale aligning with the calm she had spent a lifetime mastering. The Iron Vultures laughed and cursed as they spread out, but underneath their noise she detected something else. Arrogance, a deadly mistake. One of them kicked the side of her barn for no reason other than to hear the echo. Another smashed an old lantern hanging near the door. They weren't just searching. They were taunting the land, marking their presence with careless destruction. To them, this was entertainment, a warm-up before the real cruelty began. They had no idea this barn had seen storms far more violent than them. They had no idea someone was watching every clumsy movement they made. Mara adjusted her footing, keeping herself behind the darkest corner of the structure. She didn't need to engage yet. She wasn't here to confront. Not now. So now was for learning, studying their numbers, their spacing, their leaders, their weak links. Her focus shifted from one man to the next, silently counting them by the cadence of their footsteps and the sound each made when speaking. 6 near the barn, 4 more circling toward the house, 2 guarding the vehicles, and Razor Cane somewhere between them all, orbiting like a planet whose gravitational pull controlled them. She listened carefully. Razor wasn't speaking now. That meant he was moving. Men like him never stayed still. They prowled, always wanting the perfect entry point, always craving a moment to feel dominant. That pattern alone told her everything she needed to know about his personality and exactly how to dismantle it. A harsh metallic clang echoed from the far side of the barn as someone pried at the door with a crowbar. The wood creaked but didn't give, frustrating the man enough to make him curse loudly. Mara's jaw tightened. She had rebuilt that barn by herself 3 summers ago. Every board placed with intention, every beam strengthened with care. Not for security, but for the peace of building something with her own hands. Seeing them treat it like a toy stirred something in her. Not anger, but focus. A sharper clarity. A reminder of why she could not allow these men to take another step unchallenged. She shifted silently, circling around the shadows as if she were part of them. She could hear more voices now, drifting through the night like low, uneven murmurs. A razor wants the house checked next. Is she alone in there? Amen? Who cares? She ain't stopping us. Their confidence was almost comical. Mara had seen this type of bravado in jungles, deserts, and war zones. Men who underestimated the quiet ones. Men who believed numbers made them invincible. Men who only realized the truth when it was far too late. She crouched near the corner of the barn and touched the dirt with her fingertips. It was dry, loose. She had tilled this section earlier in the week, softening it for planting. Now that softness became a tool, a way to track movement without even looking. Footsteps left clear impressions in the soil, each indentation telling her size, weight, direction. She could sense every shift on her land as easily as a musician senses changes in a song. The iron vultures were spreading out farther now, separating, creating gaps in their formation. They thought it helped them cover more ground. Instead, it exposed them. One by one, Mara rose slowly, the rifle resting against her shoulder with a natural ease. She wasn't ready to fire, not yet. But she wanted to feel its weight, to reacquaint her body with the cold precision of the metal. She had tried to leave this life. She had chosen peace. But peace had been stolen from her the moment these men stepped onto her soil. And somewhere out near the vehicles, Razor Cane's voice cut through the night again. Lower now, more controlled. Keep moving. She's around here somewhere. Mara's expression stayed calm, but her eyes sharply narrowed. They were right about one thing. She was around here. Just not where they expected. Razor Cane stepped out from the shadows near the trucks, his boots sinking into the dirt with the weight of a man who believed the entire world answered to him. His presence was unmistakable, not because he was loud, but because he moved with a kind of coiled arrogance like someone who had clawed his way to power through fear alone. The gang members around him straightened when they heard his steps approach. His silence was more commanding than their shouts. Razor scanned the dark property with slow, deliberate eyes. Spread wider, he growled, not raising his voice, yet every man heard him clearly. She's out here, and don't break anything unless I tell you to. His tone carried an edge, sharp, calculating. Unlike his men, he wasn't here for thrill or destruction. He was here for control, ownership. He wanted the land, the house, the space, everything. He believed the farm and the woman who lived on it would fold under pressure. He believed wrong. Mara heard every word through her earpiece, her expression unchanged. Razor Cane's voice had a coldness to it that she recognized too well. Men like him didn't just want territory. They wanted to prove they could take anything they wanted. They thrived on dominance. They fed off helplessness. And worst of all, they believed their violence made them untouchable. Mara adjusted her position, placing her back against the barn wall, listening not just to the gang's voices, but to the silence between them. That silence revealed their gaps, their insecurities, their carelessness. She could hear one man dragging his feet, complaining under his breath, another breathing heavily, nervous despite the bravado he tried to display, another muttering that the place had felt wrong. She cataloged each weakness, each rhythm, each mistake. This wasn't just her land, it was her arena. And they had walked into it blind. Her hand tightened around the rifle. She didn't lift it yet, but she was close. Very close. A sudden whistle cut through the night. A signal. Razor's signal. Razor's. Two men peeled away from the group and headed toward the side of the farmhouse, flashlights slicing uneven lines across the siding. Razor followed several steps behind, his pace slow, calculated. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't concerned. He believed this was already won. He paused near her front steps, squinting at the quiet structure as if studying it, trying to understand the woman inside. Mara watched him from the shadows, analyzing his stance, the way he held his shoulders, the way he scanned without truly seeing. He thought he was the predator. But he didn't know he was already being hunted. He lifted his hand, signaling two more men to circle toward the back of the house. The crunch of their boots drifted through Mara's earpiece, mapping their positions in her mind. She shifted her stance, the calm precision of her movements contrasting sharply with their reckless confidence. The night deepened. The air grew colder. The moon slid behind a cloud, darkening the entire stretch of land until everything dissolved into silhouettes and instincts. Razor took a step closer to her porch, and for the first time tonight, Mara felt a faint hint of something she hadn't felt in years. Not fear, not doubt, but the spark of the soldier awakening fully. She whispered under her breath, almost soundless, "You asked for this." Another man near the vehicles shouted, "Ah, boss, look at this." Razor turned sharply, irritation cutting across his expression as he stalked back toward his men. Mara used the moment to move again, slipping along the side of the barn with the quiet grace of someone who had spent a lifetime learning how to vanish in plain sight. She was repositioning, setting her angle, establishing control. Oh. The iron vultures continued to spread out in a sloppy fan, unaware that every step they took only drew them deeper into the trap they had created for themselves. The night had stopped being still. The hunt had begun. And Mara Caldwell was no longer hiding who she truly was. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.